Hello, ActiveSage here on the Sage channel, and today we're going to be looking at, well, something pretty hefty. This is what I'm calling Phaeblk. It's basically a large ship for a little bit of a battle we're planning on having in a few days, maybe even Monday. Not quite sure for sure, though. Basically, recently we had a bit of a battle you might have seen, and I built this little ship to go ahead and have that battle. Now, the rules really were 4 weapons of this makeup right here, and it couldn't be too much bigger than this. Well, mine went a bit smaller, and okay, next battle I said I'll bring something bigger. Well, I might have gone a bit overboard on that with this ship, as it's gone over the size limit by a fair bit. You can see I had this little T-junction cross thing here to sort of keep the size, but I ended up using that to get the base shape of it, and it just kept going from there because it felt like it was still too small. Anyway, let's start explaining this ship, shall we? Its main weapons complement is right here in the middle, similar to the other ship, except for now I've got a camera in the center, that way the cockpit itself is safely hidden inside. And the weapon setup on this one is we're using phasers, and those will probably switch out when we actually do our battles, but for right now I just have one of the fairly powerful modded in phasers, this one phaser right here. It's pretty dang powerful, I'll show you in a little bit. As for its actual engines, I'll start with the nacelles actually. I'll get back to the center point. The nacelles here are big, huge sons of guns, and you can see that we have engines on these nacelles to allow for movement in every direction. And inside these nacelles, if I was to fly inside, you can see we have thrusters behind thrusters, but I have a huge gap here, that way they don't burn each other to bits. And then you can see in here it's just a clustered mess, as well as more gyroscopes to allow us to have all those engines. And if we were to continue down, you can see where these large nacelles connect to the actual body with these pretty huge metal things here. I'm pretty happy with these nacelles because they are a pretty, well, rectangular design, except for this slanted, using the modded blocks that you see here, all these modded blocks here. Links for these mods will be down in the description, by the way. They're pretty damn awesome, though. I'm really happy with those. I wish they were in the game, full stop. Anyway, that's the nacelles. Moving on to the back of the ship, and then I'll make my way back to the front. You can see how I originally started, as I said, with that T-junction there. I just started out with the engine grouping, similar to the one I did on the Droplet, that little ship over there, and went out from there. Now, I had gotten out to about here, when I sort of decided, you know what, this ship is still going to turn out to be a fair bit smaller than this. As you can see, from that point right there I'm aiming at to the point right here, it's about from right there to right there or so. So it still would have ended up being a bit smaller, so that's why I ended up expanding out to the nacelles, and the nacelles sort of ballooned in size. But, what are you going to do? If we carry down to the top of the ship, though, you can see that we have our antenna array. We do have that mirrored on the bottom, as well as connection ports, which actually do have pistons to raise them up and down, so that way you can actually reach out to about right here so they can connect to anything. We carry on down here, you can see it's a rather square design in the center that I'm pretty happy with, a pretty strange thing. And of course I have a bunch of running lights stuck all along this area here, as well as some thrusters that you might have seen right there, which add a nice amount of detail. Now, let's go ahead and actually switch over to my character instead of spectator cam, and fly ourselves over to this thing and hop inside it. And let's pop this door open here. Boop. This is my access door, modded. Fly on through that, and then we'll go ahead and close that door. And you might notice we're in a pretty dang white room. This is one of my bridges, and because this is pretty much just a battleship, it's only got one seat, because that's all you need for this ship in the way it's set up. And this is its bridge area here, which I actually do have gravity in, so I can actually step about and walk around in here. And if I was to head through this back door right here, it'll lead us into all the machinery that runs this place. So if I was to look in here, you can see it's a pretty dang busy area. We got tons and tons of reactors, lots of redundancy piping to keep them all connected even if things get broken up. Yeah, lots of reactors, a few projectors in here for some nonsense stuck to rotors. I'll show you that in a minute. And then we come to the back, and it's just a big wall here that I've actually put a solid wall of metal behind most of these thrusters. You can see one right there that doesn't have it. That way if the thrusters are shot out from behind, since they're such a big thing, it's the equivalent of taking out like a bunch of blocks all at once. So I decided I'd put some blocks behind the thrusters themselves to make sure this whole area here doesn't get instantly vaporized. Now, if we were to actually look down below the control room area we came from, or even above it, because it's mirrored top and bottom, left or right, well, top, bottom, and left and right are both mirrored, but they're not all exactly the same. But you can see we have gyroscopes down here, as well as 2 storage containers, one behind the other. and then it carries down, following the gyroscopes, up here to the front area of the cockpit. You can see that's where we have another door that leads back into it. And we have more pipes here that all lead to those guns at the front. Now, those guns there, I don't think they actually take ammo. They don't seem to have a connection point. But just in case we need to switch them out for a railgun or any type of other weapon that does actually need piping, I decided I'd have the piping here all ready to go. And then we do have some dead space up here that's just empty right now, but it could easily enough be filled in with anything we needed, or just with more armor if need be. Anyway, let's go ahead and fly back into the cockpit, and before I take this ship for a spin, I'm going to show you a little bit of another glimpse of what this area here, the whole interior of this ship, looks like from afar. So to do that, going back to spectator mode, and I have a few cutaways over here that you might have noticed. Now, you can see this is the nacelle right here that you've already seen. You can see behind each of these slanted panels that I usually have on here. So if we go ahead and select these slanted panels, you see I put them on here like this. Well, behind all of them, we can see we have two pieces of metal as well, just so they all sort of lined up and I can place them there, because you have to place it from the middle point of this three-way block, or 3x1x1 block. But if we fly out here, you can see what I already showed you when we were flying through the inside of it, except for in not quite as confused of a way. You can actually see how everything is laid out very, very simply right here. And then, of course, I can show you, again, how the interior of the ship is laid out from an external view, and it's much less confusing, I think you'll agree, where you can see that we have all of our reactors that we were flying down this middle section. If we were to buzz the camera in here, you can see this is the middle section we were in with the projectors, and you see we have just a basically sort of almost a cylinder of, or a slightly squished cylinder of reactors running all along, with all their piping connecting them all up, and then running into these pipes, which join up at the top and redundancy at the bottom, before connecting into these two storage containers at the top and bottom, before two more reactors, because I was getting some power issues at one point, and then leading all the way up into the big weapon setup that I talked about at the front that can, of course, be switched in and out, need be, depending on what weapons we use. And, of course, this is the cockpit right here, cutaway. Pretty cool stuff. I'm pretty happy with it all. The ship has a lot of forward thrust. And, oh, by the way, I should point out is also you can see the pistons. We do have double pistons to get those as far up enough as we would need to get them clear of the ship for the most part. Anyway, let's go ahead. Back to F6, get us back in our cockpit. Let's actually take this ship for a quick spin. You won't be seeing too much of it combat-wise until we actually get our battle going, but this is the cockpit of the ship. Once you're in it, you can see we have some controls. We can go forward. You can see our acceleration at the bottom right. We are accelerating pretty damn quickly for such a large, heavy ship. We can go ahead and turn with all those gyroscopes. You can see we turn pretty quickly, a bit of drift. The ship controls a bit strangely, I think, because of all the pistons and stuff, so you might end up with some shearing if you turn too quickly or something might break off. If I press 4, you can see that suddenly we have this big nonsense that's appeared in front of the ship sort of as a distraction. That's what those projectors are for, and since they were on rotors, they also spin. If you've been looking around, you've probably noticed that there were these things right here. These are basically top and bottom pieces of that for the two different projectors, and then I just have them set up to spin, so it has sort of this confusing thing that if you're flying directly at an enemy, and if I can do that with F9, you can see it might be slightly disorienting. Of course, if you are in first-person view, it could also be slightly disorienting using the camera at the front of the ship, but whatever. I figured it's at least a test of a different function. Anyway, let's go ahead and go back to third-person view on this ship, and we do also have our piston buttons. That's 6 and 7. You can see I press a button there, and that piston at the top of the ship is now raising up. That way I can get to another area, and I can press 7. And the piston at the bottom of the ship, you can see, is also now extending out. They're pretty slow, but I didn't really feel like tweaking them too much for fear of them shearing off more easily. And so you can see it reaches out to a pretty good distance. So you can actually see that it could dock with something, long as it, whatever it was docking with, had a little bit of a stretchy outy bit. That way it could connect to that. Let's go ahead and tell both those to head back, and there we go. And of course, as you probably did notice, I can press 5 to go into that front camera at the very front of the ship, and I can press 9 to kill all the lights on the outside of the ship, because those are almost guaranteed to be causing some lag, so I can kill those if we need be, and hopefully help somebody's computer a little bit. Now, our number 1 button is the phaser mod, and I'll go ahead and demonstrate that very quickly by lining up on, let's say, that red ship right there. And I think this is one of the most powerful weapons in the phaser mod. It seems to be from the Star Trek Enterprise from the Next Generation. But let's go ahead and give it a fire, and yeah, you can see it's slowly cutting more and more through. If we stop, we'll actually go into spectator mode. We can buzz over there, and you'll be able to see that exactly where it hit, and I can actually fire it again. It's basically cut holes straight through here. all the way through here, in fact, as you can see. So you imagine being in here and suddenly this big blast comes tearing through. Pretty scary. It's a pretty awesome mod, but it's a bit finicky. It's not really survival ready. It doesn't seem to drain your power more. As you can see, power usage is staying pretty much at 0. But it's pretty interesting. I think it does actually have some stuff built into it to be using ammo of some sort, but since we're probably going to be fighting creative and the weapons themselves only take 1 pipe of some sort, I believe, to build, I figure they're not really survival ready yet. But you can see they tear through stuff. So on Monday or whenever we do end up recording that battle, it should be something pretty interesting to see us going at each other with these lasers instead of the bullets we were. And it should be much more interesting to watch, I think. Pretty damn awesome though, I like it a lot. Anyway, let's continue maneuvering the ship, and by the way, I am using the F9 mode to control the ship while in spectator. And you can see the ship can move around pretty damn quickly, and of course I can fire the beam, and it's one hell of a chaotic system. I currently have 6 weapons set up in there, and of course I can just shear some of them off if I decide I don't want to use them, or we as a group decide it's slightly overpowered to have that many on there. And you can see I can just, well, if I could aim better in third person from afar, I could cut up a lot of these ships more easily. Oh god, that's going to be an impact, I think. Oh, that was close. Anyway guys, that's this ship. Look to see more combat of it in the near future, hopefully. And I'm pretty happy with it. It's a bit strange to have a 1-seater. I might go modding in a sleeping area or something in the future, just so I can feel like somebody could actually live on this ship instead of just taking it out for combat and then flying it back, because it is a pretty damn large ship just to be taking out for combat really quickly and then having to drive it all the way back. You'd think you'd be able to go on a few missions without having to dock with a station or something to resupply and relax. Anyway guys, that's it for this ship. It's pretty awesome. I'm pretty happy with it. This mod is fantastic to see. A lot of great sound with it too, obviously. Very, very happy with it. Oh god, that's... whew, thank god for those brakes, eh? Much better braking than the last ship. Anyways, thanks so much for watching, and I shall see you, as soon as I find this wreckage, next time.